This morning, my topic is, are ghosts real? And it's October, and a lot of things happen in October, but I always think about Halloween, and Halloween is about ghosts and goblins and skeletons and all that kind of stuff. And interestingly, as I was thinking about this, I don't know if it always happens in October, but two of the major Jewish holidays also occur in October. One is Rosh Hashanah, which is Jewish New Year, and the other one is Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. And the New Year celebration is about reflecting on the year and gratitude. And then the Day of Atonement, which if you break down the word is at one mint, it's what do I need to make reparations for, have forgiveness for, how can I make myself at one with spirit by atoning for whatever wrongs I think I have done to other people. And the reason that I think it's interesting that that's in October is, in my understanding, that's the same process that happens when we die. We go through a reflection of what did I do well, what do I feel good about, what am I proud of, and what regrets do I have. And at the end of October, especially in Mexican traditions, but I think it's in other indigenous traditions, there's a celebration that is All Saints' Day. And the belief is that All Saints' Day, which is November 1st, is when it's a time to create altars and to honor ancestors who have died. And the day before, which is All Hallows Eve, is Halloween. So Halloween, the belief says, the veil between the physical world and the spiritual world is lifted, and the spirits or souls of those who have died come forward so that we can communicate with them, we can resolve things that are unresolved, we can honor people. And then the day after All Saints' Day is called All Souls' Day, and that's when apparently the souls that have not completed that resolution kind of stay trapped here on earth and wander the earth. So most people, when they think about ghosts or haunted houses, they're thinking about that kind of spirit, like someone who is attached to either a person or a place, and they continue to hang around when they're supposed to be off into the spirit world. So is that really true or not? And I think everybody needs to come to their own opinion and experience about that. And I do want to say that not all ghosts are spooky or scary. Like sometimes unfinished business does not mean apologizing for things that I have regrets about. Unfinished business might be telling somebody I love you, like somebody who died unexpectedly and I didn't have a chance to tell them that I love you. Or maybe the person who has died wants to tell us that they love us. And I don't know, do you remember the cartoon Casper the Friendly Ghost? Yeah. So Casper the Friendly Ghost just wanted to be friends with people, and because he was a ghost, like he would scare people. It's like, oh my God, it's a ghost, and he just wanted to let them know that he loved them. And so some ghosts are like that. They're friendly presences. And I actually want to tell you a couple of ghost stories from my own experience, and some from friends that I've heard of. And also, as I was thinking about this, I don't know how I forgot it. Some years ago, I worked in the Indianapolis area, and there's a documentary filmmaker there who made a film that I believe was called Ghost Stories, where he researched places in Indianapolis that have a history and a reputation of being haunted. One of them used to be an insane asylum in the days when that's what they were called. And apparently there are spirits that hang around. So he was doing a documentary. There's a medium locally who went into the places and communicated with them. And he asked me to be the voiceover to explain what ghosts really are. So I'm in this weird documentary called Ghost Stories.
Where can we find it?
You can actually find it on YouTube, which I found out because somebody called me for counseling who was trying to communicate with his deceased wife, and he had, heard my voiceover. I had no idea it was out there, but yeah, that's where you can find it. Anyway, I was not raised with a religion. I was not raised with a belief in God. I was not raised with a belief in the afterlife. And my father had cancer, and we never talked about the fact that he was dying. And so when he died, when I was 15, I wasn't home at the time. It was such a weird experience because my experience of it was, where did he go? I mean, I had watched his body in a bed and him, the presence of my father, kind of disappearing. Part of it was from drugs and surgeries they had him on. And because of my parents' beliefs, we didn't have a funeral, so there was no way of me actually getting to say goodbye. And I was kind of haunted by that for years, just sort of experiencing my love for him, the feeling of loss, not knowing how to communicate, if I could communicate. And then years after that, the man who I married died young and unexpectedly. He was 42, I was 43. And I say unexpectedly, he was sick, he had diabetes, he was on dialysis, he was waiting for a kidney transplant, but everybody thought he was going to live. He'd get the transplant, he would live, and he actually was doing much better, but that didn't happen. He died before he had the transplant. I wasn't there, so it was kind of like this repeat of what had happened with my father. And so I appreciate what you were saying, Annette, about feeling like you had gone back to this old self. I don't really look at experiences like that as going back. I look at that when we have some learning or something that we need to understand, we keep having experiences in our lives to give us opportunities to do that, and it's kind of like a spiral. Like when I was 15, I was down here having no idea what was going on, having no even idea if there is an afterlife, and by the time I was 42, I had a strong belief in the afterlife and had already had telepathic communication with my husband when he was alive. But still, the intense feeling of grief and loss when all of a sudden he was gone and I wasn't there. I mean, thank God the last words I had said to him were, "I love you," but I hadn't seen him in a few days because he worked in a place separate from where we lived. So in order to have some kind of resolution, I really wanted to have a dream that he would come to me. And I mean, we both studied dreams, and that didn't happen. And I can't remember how long after he died I had this dream. One night before bed, I really prayed that he would come to me in a dream. I wrote him this long letter in my dream notebook. And I had a dream that night that I was at this graduation ceremony and I saw him with these other people in chairs, like way off on a stage. And I knew it was him. He was wearing this baseball cap. I couldn't tell if he could tell that I was there or not. And as the dream was ending, somebody walked up to me and gave me my Bible that had been sitting on the edge of the stage. And when I picked it up, this little piece of paper fluttered out, and it had a heart that I knew was in his handwriting. And I also knew in the dream that that was his way of telling me, "I love you." And I also knew in the dream that the reason why he hadn't come to me before in a dream is because he was still graduating to the other side, and he didn't have the ability yet to communicate verbally, like in words or in writing. And so it was so profound. I mean, it was sad. It wasn't like I was expecting I'd have this dream like, we'd meet in a field and we would hug, or we'd be in a coffee shop and talk about all the things. It wasn't like that. I knew that he still existed. I knew that he was aware of my presence. And I also knew that he was doing the best that he could do to communicate with me, and he just wasn't able or ready yet to communicate in the way that I wanted. So 3 months, 3 months after he died, my mother died suddenly of a massive stroke. I mean, she'd been playing tennis and rode her bicycle the day that she had the stroke. Cognitively, she was all there. So that was a big shock. I mean, my sisters and I thought she would live to be 100, like her aunt who died at 102. I was in Missouri, living in the middle of the country. She was in Florida. It was winter. It was December when she had the stroke. And so I had to rush home, pack, and drive through these icy country roads to get to the airport in Springfield, Missouri, so I could fly to Florida. So I was in shock. I was really scared. I felt completely alone. Nobody offered to drive me to the airport, and so I was scared about driving on these curvy country icy roads. So I walked up to the front door of the home where John and I had lived, and we had these wind chimes that were hanging outside the front door that sounded kind of like temple bells that a friend had given us for a wedding gift. And John, before he died, had become blind, so he loved those wind chimes because they just had a beautiful, sacred sound. So I'm walking up to the front door, you know, in this emotionally crazy state, and it was completely still. There was no wind, and as I walk up to the front door, these wind chimes start chiming. And all of a sudden, I felt his presence behind me, like giving me this hug. And I knew it was John, and I knew he was there with me, and that he was comforting me in this time of difficulty. And at that time in my life, I was pretty much everybody's teacher, counselor, minister. So I didn't have a lot of people in my life that gave me that kind of comfort. I mean, they all expected me to be the strong one, to be able to help them, and I am strong, and I was able to help them, but I still really needed comfort. And so, to me, that presence of John being there with me was the most loving gift that I could have been given. And one of the things that it did for me is that it moved my belief that there is an afterlife, which is something that happens in the imagination, to an absolute knowing. There was no doubt in my mind that that was him. I felt it, I experienced it. And so that was a very lovely, ghostly presence. And sometimes ghosts are not that big in terms of like a big significance. I have a friend whose aunt has since died, but when her aunt was still alive, she had dementia. She lived alone, but she also lived right next door to her niece, so she was well taken care of. Anyway, she lost her glasses, she couldn't find them, and her name was Lottie. She kept saying that her brother Chester, who had died maybe, I don't know, a year before that, came to her and told her that her glasses were in the basement. And everybody said, oh, that's just crazy Aunt Lottie, because she couldn't go up and down the stairs because of physical conditions, so they couldn't be in the basement. And they thought it was just her dementia, but she insisted that Chester kept coming to her and saying, your glasses are in the basement, and told her exactly where they were. And so finally, her niece, the one who lived next door, she rolled her eyes and said, okay, yeah, we're gonna humor Aunt Lottie. And guess what? She went downstairs and those glasses were exactly where Uncle Chester told her that they were. So sometimes ghosts are there, you know, you might have seen things like that in movies. Sometimes they play tricks, but sometimes they just give us helpful, friendly advice if we pay attention to it. So I have other stories about what I've experienced that I don't really have time to talk about this morning, but I wrote about some of them in this book, Intuitive Dreaming. In fact, that was my inspiration for writing this book, was to share some of those stories which I think might help other people. But I want to talk about another kind of ghost, which Annette touched on a little bit. And it seems kind of interesting to me, and I don't know when this term started becoming popular, probably when social media became popular. But if you are in communication with somebody and all of a sudden they cut off communication, we call it being ghosted. And in the other term of a ghost is someone who has died who doesn't cut off communication. They come to us with communication, or we come to them with communication. But in this other sense of ghosting, it's kind of like that person died, even if they didn't die, but our connection with them died, and we have no idea what happened because they just don't communicate. So I wondered, why is that called ghosting? And in my experience, because I've been ghosted a few times, it's similar to what happened when my father died. It's like not knowing what the H happened and being haunted by that. You know, did I say something wrong? Did I do something wrong? You know, people say, oh, it's not your fault, it's just his loss. It's like, so what? The point is, I want to know what happened, and there's no communication, and so I feel disconnected. I think that part of why we get haunted by things is because there's an urge that we all have for resolution. And so sometimes, oftentimes, resolution comes from being able to simply talk about the fact that this is bothering me. And what I found is that I'm a pretty good listener. And so when someone needs to talk about something that's bothering them, I listen to them, and even if I have an urge to give them advice, if I feel like giving them advice, I usually ask if they want advice. I don't just jump in and try to take away their pain, or jump in and try to get them to stop talking about what's bothering them. And what I've found is that if I need to talk about what's bothering me, if somebody won't let me do that, then I still end up being haunted by it. Like if somebody says, oh, you just need to let it go, or oh, well, you know, it's just your old self that's coming up. Maybe, but I think it's more, there's something that I need to understand here, and in order to understand it, I need to express it. I need to bring it out. And as I was thinking about this, I saw a post just yesterday from one of the friends I have in North Carolina, and she posted something that came from a local radio station, and I think it's kind of appropriate here. So the radio station was talking about the suffering, which is quite intense, of the people in North Carolina who, I mean, some of them still haven't been found. There are homes that have been destroyed. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do want to read you this part. Two things can be true at once. You can be grateful you are okay, and be completely overwhelmed by the devastation and loss you are experiencing and witnessing in our community. And then this is the part that relates to being haunted by things when you feel like you've been ghosted in some way. We need each other right now. Share your grief and your sorrows. The longer you carry it, the heavier it becomes. So I think when we feel haunted by something, whether it's an actual person who's died, some experience in our life that's bothering us that we need to resolve, it's important to realize that it doesn't mean that you're weak if you need to talk about it. It doesn't mean that you're trying to hold on to it if you need to talk about it. It means that there's something that you still need to understand. And that's part of our human experience. No matter how evolved we are, no matter how far we've progressed, no matter how much we've learned, there's always more to learn. There's always farther that we can progress. And I think that those lessons that are karmic, meaning that we have similar repeated experiences that happen, they keep happening because that's what we're here for, is to learn and grow. So I would encourage you to have compassion for yourself in whatever those experiences are. And I would encourage you to be willing to support and receive whoever is in your life who wants to be able to share those things. And I hope everyone has a happy Halloween.